Hello, everyone. We are here for another Wednesday about culture and astrology. Today we have a very special guest, Rachel Bennett, who is our Chiron person. People really liked her Chiron video, and I know that because of the numbers. But Rachel, so we're gonna having you on to talk about Chiron and culture, which we can attack as several different ways, But you had some thoughts. Do you want to share some of those with us?
Yeah, I was kind of going through history a little bit. I didn't go too far back. I only went back to like the 1950s, but I was looking as Chiron changes signs and how that may have affected society, like what some of those how it showed up um in a in society. So how it showed up like in culture and how I was applying that to the changes that it seems to make and then go into the next sign and see where the changes, like the healing has taken place within that part of history, and then gone on to the next sign to work on something else with a different group of people, you know? So yeah, I was looking at it as it's transiting and how that may affect people, and then how it can show up in someone's chart.
You're saying that in culturally speaking, that there have been different waves of kind of trauma and healing among different, generations of Chiron. So, is there so where did you start in the 1950s? Where was Chiron then?
Capricorn from 1951 to 1955. The other thing about Chiron is it's retrograde too, right? So sometimes it dips back into a sign and then dips back into a sign. So watching, like kind of looking at that pattern of flow was pretty interesting to me.
Hmm. Interesting. So, do you want to go through the signs, or is that just kind of a loose thought? And do you have any comments on that, Ricky?
I do. And it's interesting. I think about Chiron a lot, and this is to me where race, etc., in real life, you know, where the where it becomes real is to me. And I'm saying this in jest, but I think there's something behind what I'm saying. Is I feel like Chiron is like Pluto for white people.
Repeat that again?
Is Pluto for white people?
Okay, I see it.
Oh God. Yeah.
Everyone, Ricky has been reported to be in a mischievous mood today, so
Yes.
we are in trouble.
Exactly. I could spend the rest of the hour talking about this, but I will not because I think that statement sums it up.
Okay.
Right. Well, I'm white and I'm taking my Chiron. I like having two Plutos,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't include you in my white people list. Okay?
Oh,
But 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 yeah, that's my sense. And part of it is my interpretation through my experiences, race, gender, and all that stuff of my teacher and his perspective. And it's kind of filtered through that, and then through my experiences of what I notice. Again, and I look at people in their charts, and people want to talk about Chiron all day, but as soon as we start to talk about Pluto, it's like they scamper back to Chiron. I'm like, okay, all right, that's right. You got to meet people where they are.
so
Yeah, I like what you said. My Chiron is almost exact trine to my Pluto, so I feel like
Yeah,
they support each other, and
yeah.
yeah, there is a lot of learning from both of them.
And we say a lot of learning, but if you think of just the amount, like Chiron is interesting, and we can get a lot of information, especially if it's doing something loud in your chart. But if you measure it about weight, okay, and we can look at the astronomy if we want, we can look at history, we can look at whatever you want, and we weight Pluto and Chiron.
Yeah,
No.
Pluto's definitely got more of a punch.
Yes, and if you realize that we're talking about the wound, right? And we're looking at one chart. We're talking about one person. So again, we could say there's a deeper wound, and then there's a easier wound to access. Right? It's all wounding. And if you look at the astronomy of it, what Chiron and Pluto share is that they cross orbits. Pluto dips into Neptune's or a sub-Neptune orbit to have certain experiences, and then it dips back out. Right? Chiron does the same thing. Okay, it dips in and then it dips back out. So there, at least like looking at the symbolism of the astronomy and how we talk about it as astrologers, for me, Chiron is beautiful and wonderful. I just want to make sure that it's in its place, right?
Yeah.
So do you associate it with Pluto because it has that kind of deep transformational quality to it?
Well, the way I do is because it dips in. There's the only two objects because we're not calling Chiron. We can't call Chiron a planet. I mean, teacher said it's the size of Rhode Island, So it like they both cross. They dip in and they dip back out. And I think of Pluto and the wound. This is one of the ways I think about Pluto and the wound is when we dip in and we're in the human side of it, right? We call it a wound, right? But when we cross over to the other side, we're going to probably have a different perspective about what happened. Right. Because again, it's perspective from a spiritual, right? You read all the spiritual books, right? The soul cannot be wounded, cannot be harmed, cannot be wetted, right? Blah, 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 blah. So just that idea, when we're talking about the wound, it's one dimension, and we can also appreciate that there's another dimension where the wound takes a completely different perspective.
Yeah, there's a relationship there, and I think that that's important when looking at someone's chart. What is the relationship with Chiron to Pluto in someone's chart?
Well, to see if there is, right? Because we'll see how, right? I think there's something beautiful about the story of Chiron, and I love it. And again, it adds so much color. I just want to make sure that if we're talking about the wound in the chart, that we start with Pluto and then we refer back to Chiron to see how Chiron can give us easier access to that. Again, it's because some people, because they haven't had the lived experiences, right? When I'm making fun of calling white people, right? They need a stepping stone. But people have had to experience the result of all the shadow side of the people in power. They know Pluto firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's culture, right? Because when we look at a chart, right, these are unconscious possibilities, but how they actually play out depends on who's allowed to play what roles, right? Which roles are easier to play for which people.
Let's talk about that for a second. Okay. Because I feel like the Chiron story is a lot about trauma, wounding, and healing those wounds, right? So let's talk about different cultures and their relationship to trauma. So I've heard of cultures like, for example, and don't quote me on this, but it's like indigenous cultures where if somebody's like schizophrenic or they have like hallucinations, the whole society like bands around them and like supports them, as opposed to, in white culture, we like put you in a hospital and give you medication. Like how does different cultures like relate to the trauma and wounds? And then how does that,
Yeah, like how they approach it. Yeah, and why is that? Why did indigenous cultures understand that love was more healing than isolation,
Well, even the concept of healing, and that's what I don't think they saw it as something that was bad or wrong. That's why when we say wound, even that is it's a cultural thing. Because I see it, right? You talk to football players about wounds, right? They don't exist, okay?
That's interesting.
Right. Other people, right? Everything can be explained as a response to a traumatic experience they had. Right? It's different. And I think to me, to answer this question, one place to look in the eighth house is what is the culture's relationship to death? And what happens next?
No, you bring up a really good point, because in the culture of extreme masculinity, it's not really like there's a more kind of like toughen up cupcake mentality. And like, I'm actually more along, I have a Sun Square Mars, and I'm more along the lines to say that to somebody, to be like, oh no, I have trauma informed. Like, I'm not it's not that I'm not super trauma informed. I'm just like, can we get over trauma and move forward? And that is a rigidity and a problem with my temperament, is like, I'm not super into trauma. Like,
but that's not a problem. That's what I'm saying. It just depends on the environment. If you're a Viking, okay, right, you'd be the queen, right? They would worship you. But in certain cultures, right, you'd be a pariah because you would bring everyone's trauma to the surface.
Yeah. So what cultures are there cultures that I guess I would say thrive in trauma or have more trauma, an affinity to trauma?
They're like Russians.
Oh, man.
Oh my God, for anyone who's watching, We are sorry. We're sorry. We're
No,
trauma disinformed today.
yes, today we are, right? Because that's what I'm saying. This is culture, right? That's what I'm saying. If you're talking to, like, again, you imagine a situation where an African American who's been through like just regular life being African American, and they're a therapist, and they're sitting there, and there's a white lady on the couch, right, complaining that her kids don't listen to her, right? Right? And like, she started talking about she's traumatized because her dad didn't listen to her, right?
I totally get it, by the way. And that we're having this conversation because I was just talking to my partner last night, and my partner is African American. And we were talking about how interesting it has been to be in a serious relationship as an interracial couple, and me being the first white woman that he has dated, and bringing me into like the social network of everything, and how that's such a huge topic, like the names that I'm called and how I'm referred to, like that is what I'm being referred to more than anything else before people even really meet me, and he's getting that feedback a lot. And so he's coming up with having to face that. And it's really interesting that I've connected is that his Chiron is in Gemini. So he's really struggling with the communication aspect of like, okay, well, I want to protect her, and I need to communicate properly about this, and all of those types of things. So yeah, I get it, like on a totally different level.
Yeah, and where a lot of that is, well, most of that is coming from at you is coming from trauma, and it ain't Chiron trauma.
Okay,
it's Pluto that. Trauma. You see, right? This is what I'm saying, right?
It made my wounds, to be completely honest, because I have Chiron in Cancer, and so it's like there's things like that, like around. I don't ever feel like I'm accepted into family. That's how I've kind of interpreted a lot of my Chiron stuff.
Well, I mean, this is one thing about astrology, right? We use it to describe, but it kind of takes the responsibility of the choices that we make, or we could even say we attract experiences where it requires more effort to feel accepted. Because, right, we have free choice, but if you look closely, right, that yes, you can see based on your chart how things are showing up, right? But one of the levels we don't look at is like where we made the choice, right?
And where we are attracting the same lessons over and over again, because I believe our soul really wants to learn these lessons.
Well, we say lessons, but I think, and I think that puts it in a capsule. But it's like it's life. We learn to respond, and I think that, to me, we can call it lessons, but we're sensitive beings, right? And there's stimuli that come from the environment, and then we figure it out, right? You watch a little kid learn to walk. It's like, wow, how do you do that? We're constantly, right, meeting new experiences and figuring out how to adapt. We can call them lessons, but it kind of hides the fact that that's just life. That's what it means to be a living being.
I love that you just interpreted that, especially because we were just talking about the Gemini Sag aspect of like how you are looking at it as learning and growing. I'm looking at it and perceiving it with all of my Sag placements as a lesson.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I said this would be fun.
I think it's interesting that certain cultures, I don't want to say they thrive on trauma, but they kind of center and pull out traumas and wounds. Like, for example, like shamans or things like that. Like if you are living as a shaman, people come to you with wounds like constantly, right? And so it's like the culture of shamanism is woundedness and healing from woundedness. But like I love Ricky's like football example. It's like here we do not get wounded. Like we are warriors. Like our warrior culture less inclined to do this shadow work and like purge the wounds, or do they just, I mean, and is one better? Is it better to be wound attentive, or is it better to kind of shirk wounds, or is it, I mean, they're just different. But
yeah, well, here's the thing. I'll use a Mars example. Okay, if you have a strong Mars, right, meaning you're going to find yourself in Marsy experiences, probably not a good idea to play the wound game. It's important to reorient yourself. So an example, when I was a kid, my mom used to whoop my ass, and she had this, she called it my medicine. It's like it was like an extension cord, and she had tape around the handle, and I had to keep it like up in my closet. And when it was time, she said, "Go get your medicine," and I had to go get it and give it to her, and she'd beat my ass. And true story, right? But listen, no, it gets better, right? The thing, I still have a scar on my arm, and whenever there was a scar or a mark or blood, I I reveled in it. I reveled in it. And this is what I'm saying. Like, if looking back as a kid, and I see with my kid is my mom is Aries with Mars conjunct the ascendant, right? And the thing about Aries, Mars, right? They draw the line in the sand. And if you can see the line, right, you know what the consequences are for crossing that line, right? And I crossed that line all the time, right? But the thing, I wasn't a wound. It was something that I took pride in, that I was free, right? That I could do what I wanted because I was tough enough to pay the price.
Battle
scars. So in that way,
Yes.
it kind of influenced and strengthened your masculinity probably growing up. I don't know if that's correct, but then how did those experiences shape your connection or ability to be intimate with women later on in life? Because you know the relationship with your parents is kind of something that you carry on as far as that process goes into adult life. So was there any trauma or wounding that was created by what you just explained?
So when you say intimacy, again, this is based on Sag, Libra, okay? Where the point I'm coming from, again, my mom is an Aries. So in that ability that she could beat my ass and we could still be intimate, that is intimacy.
Okay.
Right? So it means that I can have an argument with my wife, right? And a second later, right, be loving. That's what it means. I mean, it means that I've found a way to invite passion and intimacy. I have Mars conjunct Venus in Aries, so I've had to, right, conjunct the South Node, right? It's kind of so it was preparation. That's why I'm saying the trauma point of view can only come from someone that doesn't believe in God. That's why Pluto, right, death, right? Once we cross over, we get to see, oh, ha 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 ha.
Well, okay, you still haven't answered my question, you guys, of like, is it better to be trauma informed and really focusing on traumas, or is it better to just move forward from the trauma and,
it depends who you ask. This is what I'm saying, right? Someone that has strong Mars in their chart, it's better to not be trauma informed, right? Because you'll just be cutting everyone up and feeling bad about it. If you have a lot of Moon, Venus, Neptune, you better be trauma informed, right? Otherwise, people will disappear. I'm telling you, my first wife, as soon as my voice went up, she's gone.
Trauma informed. So it depends on the whole chart. Like I have Mars 0 degrees in Aries, so I have that potential to be kind of the description of what you are saying. I have that potential, but I also have a lot of softer placements that will approach things differently. So it just depends on the chart. And as far as what you're asking, Andy, is like culturally, is it better for people to be trauma informed? I mean, it depends on the person's chart, because you know how some people like to be the victim and just like to hold on to that victim mindset, but then they get stuck in it. And the whole point of like why I do look at Chiron in people's charts and look how it interacts with other planets and placements is because I want to look at how do we get down to the core of the healing and moving that through, moving through that. That's how I approach it. But there are people, there's totally, like we just described, you described like a football player versus, like some very taken care of person who's never gone through any economical stress in their life and like all of these things. And they just want to hold and cling on to like the one time their mom spanked them. You know what I mean? Like two completely different experiences. And so it's just different. We have to look at the whole chart, I suppose.
I think the key here is to not let trauma hold one back. And I think that when people look into the past over and over about things that happened in their childhood and this and that, it's just like you could be moving forward right now. But I do think maybe if there's planets in the 4th house or something that is looking backwards, that is part of the soul's job, is to kind of look back and uncover stuff, or like, if there's some Chiron stuff going on.
Yeah. And I think culturally, I mean, we can make the argument, and I think because we're up here on our pedestals, that, and at least I can, that from a spiritual point of view, from a purely spiritual point of view, right? What does God think about trauma? Right. That's where that's where
trauma.
Right. Exactly. That's where I would start. And if someone can answer God's relationship to trauma, then we can talk. Right. But if someone can't answer that question, then we can't really have a conversation.
Wow. Ricky's really on one today. All right, this is good. Okay, I actually prepared something kind of interesting, you guys, which is I was looking at the way that we heal cultural wounds. Okay, so we've talked a lot about, about Chiron in the past episode of healing personal wounds. But it's like, what do we do about woundings in a culture? And in fact, one of the things that happened at the beginning of this series was I came in asking Ricky these questions like, do you think astrology is racist? And like all these kind of stuff. And it's like by merely bringing up racism, I feel like I had kind of re-wounded the issue. And so it's like, what do we do with wounds culturally? Do we bring them up? Do we let them lie? Do we stuff them under the table? Like, what is the best pathway there? And I guess I'll let you guys to speak to that before I bust out this list I found on the internet about ways to heal cultural wounds.
Well, I mean, my response is going to be very Libra, and I'm going to say that I think that they should be brought up, and there should be a a purpose to connect and understand and try to or seek to understand the other person. I mean, through that, because that's really what I think most people desire is they desire to be understood and they desire the connection in order to be able to heal. But they have to understand themselves and they ultimately have to heal, like be open to healing themselves. But with the assistance of others, I think that like what you described with indigenous tribes coming together and not shaming somebody because they are going through something with their mental health, like coming together and loving on that person seems like a much better approach than the way that we approach it here in the United States.
So,
So,
what's your
yeah, I just something I'm just sensitive to is most, and I think this is what Nietzsche was talking about when he said God was dead, is that most people's idea in connection to the wound is coming from a wounded place. Because so the word heal, it means wholeness, right? It means return to wholeness. 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 Again, what does God think about the wound? Right? And the wholeness, we can see a wound, but it has a place in the whole. It's not like a stuck place or something we have to spend extra energy attending to. And I think the clue is really because like the healing of the wound is where we see where an experience or something we felt or something we didn't understand, we see how it fits in the larger scheme of things. And I'm an astrologer, believer, whatever. But I think that's why I'm so attracted to it is because growing up in my culture, religion was so important. So it was embedded in me, Sagittarius on the cusp of my fourth house. It was embedded in me that there is, right, that there is an answer, that there is wholeness there. So, my dumb Gemini ass, right, ninth house, been looking for it been looking for it everywhere, And it's like only when I started to find astrology and to see what the possibilities were, it was a system of wholeness, right? Everything has a place, everything fits. And it's the lens that I use to take in everything. And so for me, it's been like Chironist, like instantaneous healing.
well,
And I'm telling you, like the wounds from my mom, right here, again, like the wounds serve a purpose, and they were there for me to like pluck out and be like, what the hell is this, right? And the thing my mom said over and over again as her excuse, and it's a really good excuse. You weren't born with an instruction manual. Okay. That's a gift that my mom gave me because when I found astrology, I was like, actually, I was, and then I can imagine if my mom had this instruction manual, right? She'd have done a much better job, but she didn't, and I can appreciate her instruction manual. And I'm like, I get it. So the wounding, it's like boom, poof. Like I'd look for it, but it's not there. There's just an appreciation of her skillfulness and playing out the chart the way that she did.
Well, someone recently said to me that the crowd doesn't like conflict; they like the possibility of resolution of conflict. Like, so if you have no conflict or no trauma in an episode of a TV show, there is no episode, but it's not the conflict they like, it's the resolution of the conflict. And so I like what you're saying is that it's that trauma into wholeness that is the appeal there. All right, sorry, Rachel.
No, I agree. I'm totally disagreeing with you. The symbol of Chiron, like when you look at the symbol, I always look at it as a key. That's why, I love Chiron because I look at it as a key. And it's like the key that unlocks to me, I think it's like the key that unlocks healing potential. Of course, we all have free will and choice and everything like that, but I think that there is a lot of value and substance within that.
So I mean, I really want to like hone in on this point that Ricky made and that we're kind of like looking at here is that it's okay to look at wounds if there's possibility towards resolution from them, and if we're working towards wholeness, then this is a really healing thing to do.
I agree.
Okay. Wow,
Yes.
another good point from Ricky Williams. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So you guys, if we are going to heal cultural trauma, there's a list here. One of the things we can do is understand the traditions of that culture. It says cultural healing emphasizes understanding and practicing traditions, customs, and rituals meaningful to that community. So that does suggest that if we're going to heal a certain culture from a wound, we would have to look at that culture and say, how does this culture traditionally heal from wounds or traditionally do anything, right? Like maybe in African American culture, they go to the church more often. Like you've talked about the rich spiritual life. I mean, I don't know. How do we understand this equation?
Okay, so again, I'm viewing through the lens of astrology, and it's related to the article I sent you about appreciating cultural gifts. You know,
Well,
what,
yeah.
yes, cultural wealth. Like there's something that each culture has to offer. And I think if you're born in that culture, right, that you have a greater opportunity to receive that wealth and turn it into something, right? Offer it to the world. And going back to the idea of wholeness, and we touched on this a long time ago, and probably seeking to get to the core of my wounds, my Chiron wounds. It's real. It's real. I have Chiron conjunct my Mercury.
Ricky laughs at his wounds.
I do, because it's when you can see the story. It's like we watch movies and we laugh, even though horrific things are going on, because we appreciate the drama. We appreciate.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do in enlightenment is watch your life like a movie.
Yeah, you appreciate. That's why I call the app Leela. Get people to appreciate that life is a play. It's a play. So, but part of the play is gender. Part of the play is culture. So, and I talked about this last week, but it helped, even though I'm not a woman, it helped me heal my appreciation for women on a very deep level. Again, thinking of women in the age of Taurus, right? It's when we have the Venus dolls and agriculture, right? Women where it was easier to appreciate and worship women because it was Taurus time, Then we moved into Aries time, and it's a time of war, right? That's when we get all the stories of raping and pillaging, right? And then the role of a woman becomes very different, very different. And if we have the astrological background to appreciate, right, to understand the nuance between Taurus and Aries, and then we put it on humanity, and we take the moon and we say this represents women, all right. And we take the sun and we say this represents men in general moving through these times in humanity. We can gain a deeper appreciation for what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And to me, it heals a lot because we're seeing the whole picture where I think at least, the people that have been the minorities, whether that's racial, ethnic, gender minority, power minority, right? That it does come with the sense of hopelessness, of we're stuck with this, right? And if we allow that to be true, we can't see wholeness. It doesn't even exist and not even possible, right? And to me, that's the Pluto. That's a deep wound right there. And to look at what is the purpose of culture, what is the purpose of gender in the larger scheme of things, I think it allows healing to occur at a very deeper, I call it a spiritual level.
Well, in the gender thing, you have to adhere to the traditions of each gender. I remember my baby daddy went at some point to heal some of his wounds. He went to this thing called the Mankind Project, and they got naked in front of a fire, like roasting a pig or something. I don't really know, but it's like they definitely weren't doing what like women would do, in order to heal their wounds. And I think that was an example of like these traditions being adhered to as far as like dealing cultural wounds. Do you have any comments on this, Rachel?
I agree with you. I think gender does play a big factor. I mean, even in the example that you gave of your baby daddy, it's also possibly, I'm going to throw it in there just because I'm in the community, but it could be like sexuality too. It could be
You got it.
As well. How are they How are they connected? Where do they feel like they can be part of the group in order to heal? Where do they feel seen? That kind of thing.
To me, but the idea, in order to heal, if we're talking about in order to return to wholeness, then I'm all on board.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I just see people making healing the aim. Right. And then it's the goal.
Oh, okay.
And if wholeness is the goal, I'm good with that. But if healing, most people, when they say healing is the goal, then they're healed, and they're like,
yeah, what do I do now?
Now what?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. My philosophy has always been like, if I'm not growing, I'm dying.
Yes.
That's always been my philosophy. So I agree with you on being whole. We can use that. When I use the word healing, we can say come to wholeness.
You can call it holing. Although
but Andy, I think this is where teleology comes in. Right? Because we're talking about growing now, but it's not just random growing, right? That there's a certain form that's growing.
Yeah, interesting. Growing into your more whole self would be healing pretty much every wound that has ever occurred. I mean, expressionism of self really eradicates wounds, from what I can tell. The people who are the most wounded are the most underexpressed people, watching other people express and then feeling just wounded by. Yeah, the victimization stance really comes when people are unwilling to take the stage in their own life. And sorry, I digress. Okay. Finding ancestral guidance is another way we can heal cultural wounds. So, just bring up the queer community, Rachel. You made me think of how most GLBT people I know would be most healed by like a queer elder or like an ancestral, elders of their own community. And so, what do we think about elders and ancestors in healing?
I want to talk about that a little bit. Is like a lot of people, I mean, I'm in my 30s. This has been my experience, but it's been hard growing up and feeling like you're different and feeling shame around sexuality sometimes, for my personal experience. And then growing up and going, I don't know who to talk to. Like almost feeling like you need to create your own family in order to be authentic and true to yourself. Because if that option isn't around, it's like seeking somebody who understands that. So you're right, like somebody that's in the community, that's possibly an elder. I think that would be helpful. And I have another example of like, what if you are growing up in a community where something is outside of your own personal integrity, but they're telling you as elders, this is what you should be doing, and giving you that type of advice. What do you do at that point?
That's a wound in and of itself, I would imagine, being required to be subjugate to somebody who's acting like dominant to you, who doesn't know what's going on, like.
Well, what if it's just the culture in general? Like it's all around.
So to me, like, and it's the theme. Pluto, that's funny. Pluto's squaring my Chiron right now. So Pluto, it's like Pluto Chiron. We're like weaving in between, going between the deeper wounds and then the ones that are more on the surface. And I think that the deeper wound, Pluto rules death, and this idea of what happens after we die. I'm telling you, if I see someone that have strong 8th house, strong Pluto stuff, the first question I ask them before we even get talking about anything else is, what do you think happens after we die? Because it's that ancestor worship, right? It built in. It's kind of obvious when you think about it, is what happens after you die is you go up and you look after the people on Earth. So, and Pluto to me is the planet that gives us access to be able to hear and communicate with individuals, beings, etc. on the other side, right? Our relationship to what happens next. And it was built in so many cultures, ancestor worship. Some people kept, right, the skull of the patriarch in the home, right? Some people buried the bodies underneath the hut where they lived. So this connection to realizing that when someone leaves here, they're not gone forever. They're in a place where they can be more advantageous and beneficial to us. It's like ancestors on steroids, because our ancestors, the elders that we see and we experience, they're still limited by being in an earthly body. But once they go to the next plane, right, certain things that were wounds are no longer wounds. It turns into wisdom, and we have access to still connect to those beings.
Yeah, I believe that to be true. I had a near-death experience in 2018. I died and like came back, and that experience changed the whole way that I see like the other side 100% completely. So I agree that that wisdom is on the other side and that it's not. So, but in the question, in the terms of like what Andy was saying, is like what happens when you go to elders here living, like elders living here, right? Like on earth, not the ancestors as far as on the spiritual plane. But what do you do when you go to the elders in the community here on earth, but it's not in alignment with what you are trying to grow from? You're not
I just answered the question. You go above them to the ancestors. That's
Okay.
right, because the elders have wounds too, right? And those wounds are going to manifest right through their advice they give to the people below. I think all wounds on a Plutonian level, at least, right, are cultural. Because, you think like someone is born with a strong Pluto. I think planets are like magnets, right? So a strong Pluto is a magnet for wounding energy. So whatever wounds are floating around in the family, in the house, in the culture, in the community, right? That little Pluto child, they're going to suck them right up and manifest them in real life. But I think the higher purpose is they're going to make a response to them, right? They're going to be like, fuck this, and they're going to do something to change it.
Well, Rachel, my response to elders who don't, align with what I think is I just start making my own activism and like flood my YouTube channel with people of my own age and like I don't know, it's just like I'm just like, yeah, no thanks. Like, but it's like I'm not susceptible to like, just any wounds. But yeah, I think elders can be healing, ancestors can be healing, but just like anything in woundedness, if it's not healing your wound, you need to go somewhere else, which brings us to our next one, which is ceremonies and rituals. Okay, so another way to heal, and I think indigenous communities have a lot of ceremonies and rituals. I think one of the things lacking in maybe white communities is ceremonies and rituals. I mean,
we have the tools. I think astrology provides the tools for these kinds of ceremonies. Because studying different ceremonies, all of them you could argue easily, they were there to evoke the energy of one of the planets. They in some cultures that had a closer connection to astrology, it's evident, like in Mesopotamia. But other cultures where the connection wasn't so explicit, if you just understand the archetypes, you can see it if you look at the nature of the ceremony or the puja. A
lot of ceremonies in astrology, new moon, full moon, all kinds of things. So I think the ceremonial nature of it is healing in and of itself. So
one of the practices that I suggest to my students, right, is every morning, and it only takes a few minutes. Every morning, just go around your chart and say, oh, I love my 9th house Gemini sun. I love my 9th house Jupiter in Gemini. Love my moon in Cancer in the 10th. I love just that kind of ritual of just going around the chart and doing that. It's right. Talking about healing traumas, right? Because you start to look at your life as a manifestation of the potentials in your chart. Then again, it's like watching a movie. It's like, wow. It's so interesting how that manifested in that environment. Whoa. I wonder what else is possible.
Rachel, what do you think?
Loving yourself and loving the map that you come in with. I really like that advice.
Rachel, what do you think about rituals and ceremonies in healing?
So I think, did you mention like white culture, we're a little bit disconnected?
I feel it.
I would agree on that completely. But I do think that what we are, as far as the people I know, and I guess the white people that I know, like I'm a Reiki master and I like Reiki, like I look at alternative healing. I do shadow work with people. I suggest shadow work based off of things that we discuss and talk in their chart. I've talked to you about like art therapy, music, and mental health, just like talk therapy, all of those types of things. So past life regression, those are not ritualistic or ceremonial, but I think that they can be an alternative method to self-acceptance and understanding.
Is church a ceremony? I mean, I feel
of course,
even an AA meeting is kind of a ritual, right?
Anything that's done with intent is a ritual.
Interesting. Well, and I think if we're trying to heal our own family system or our own culture, we could develop rituals and traditions and, having those things around holidays or birthdays or, whatever it is. I think families that have more ceremonies and rituals probably have more opportunities for healing wounds. Like if you do a monthly new moon ritual with your family, like you can heal the wounds of the month repeatedly. I mean, so this kind of a cool thing to think about integrating into.
Yeah.
I actually do that. Every new moon, I set my intentions. Every full moon, I do my releases, and I have the 3-day candle that I light. And my partner does the same thing. We both do that, and we both talk about that, and we write down whatever we're releasing, like on the candle, or we write down our manifestation, and we're very intentional about it. And we even spend, we practice like other things like physical time, together to try to really sit in that energy when it comes to manifestation and all of that. So you can create your own rituals, I believe, and your own ceremonies. They don't have to come from like outside culture. You do what aligns with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a religious person. And I really try to like walk my talk. And so it's like if I am this idea of manifestation, I can't imagine trying to manifest something that I didn't see in the chart.
Well, the chart is a map of manifestation.
That's what I'm saying. But it's interesting to me when it's like someone will come and they'll say they're doing they're manifesting, and I'm saying, did you look in your chart to see what's going on? And they said no. And then I'm like, well, how are you deciding? How are you deciding what you want to manifest? Where is that coming from?
Yeah, I try to look at the planetary aspects according to the new moon or the full moon. And what I'm trying to do, I guess, in those moments is bridging like the spiritual knowledge or whatever, the spiritual with the physical to some degree.
Oh, I think that's what the chart allows us to do, is because to me, the chart, my working definition for spiritual means potential. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking at the chart to see where the energy is, where the potential is, and then aligning our intention with that potential. It's like it's using the mental to bring the spiritual and the actual physical together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. Bridging the spiritual with the physical. And I believe, so that's what I prefer to do in like ritual type things.
Yes. And so healing for me, healing a family is we have to decide what is the purpose of this family's existence.
Family tales,
if we don't ask that question, then what is healing? What does it even mean? Right? There's no wholeness. It's just right. That's the me like the lower definition of healing. If we have to say, and then again, I'm a philosopher, I have to say, well, if the family is going to heal, we have to understand what is the purpose of the family, and let's move toward in that direction.
Beautiful.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that you're bringing up manifestation and teleology. And I think if a culture or a community knew what their purpose is, just speaking to kind of what you're saying, that could be very healing. I mean, that's not on our list, but I mean, we don't have to adhere to the list.
Well, it is on the list. I think it's embedded, it's hidden in the idea of the ancestors, right? That there's something that's existed, right, in the ancestors that continues to exist. And if we can figure out what that is, it gives us a sense of its purpose and its trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, another one that we are doing with this show is re-examining narratives. It's saying that developing new narratives about the past that emphasize survival, resilience, and cultural strengths can help counteract negative historical narratives. And Ricky, that article you sent me, that's exactly what you sent me, is an article where it's critical race theory and is churning cultural deficit theory, where we're saying like African-American people are absolutely oppressed and stuff. And it's saying, well, what are the cultural wealths of this culture and how are they actually winning in all these kinds of ways? And I love that flip script article that you sent me. And so I think that is one of the things we've done absolutely with this show is re-examine the narratives. We started with racism and astrology, and now we've just gone all over the place celebrating culture, in all these ways. And so this is a cultural healing, what is going on here.
Yeah. I'd have to agree. And I think I'm a 10th house Cancer moon. So healing is like always on my mind. And astrology to me, has been a wonderful tool because you can apply it right through gender, right? It helps you appreciate the purpose of these things because you can sit back and you can see the role that they're playing.
So what do you think, Rachel, about re-examining narratives in culture or even in a person's personal Chiron? Just how does that help?
Yeah, so I mean, when I read charts with a person, I'm looking at like the deeper emotional narrative of the person. That's kind of what I'm looking at and discussing. I'm really actually listening. I ask questions. I do like motivational interviewing to a degree because I want to ask questions so that they can come to the answer themselves and what feels right for them and has a, that they resonate with. Um, Culturally and on a broader spectrum, it's, you know, we have to collectively come together and find where everyone is, I guess, understanding each other and connecting and then moving on from there. I mean, ask the question again because they're two different, way different approaches, I think, in my mind.
Well,
Well,
I think you answered the question. She's asking about narratives and cultural narratives, and
Mhm.
I think right the cultural narratives that we have, at least black-white relations, are so much rooted in slavery and it's unhealed, and so it kind of creates a limitation on where the narrative can evolve. And I think if we can come from it's taboo to do this, but I think of right how else was the universe going to get a couple million Africans to America? You know, right?
well, and so
Again,
Rachel, just looking at the queer community, I feel like they've done a lot of this, like reclaiming things, like even the word queer, the reclamation of that word is is reworking the narrative, right? Like you
Mhm.
can't call us a wounding name. We will take that back. And then also the working with pronouns and things like that. I mean, I think that there is a lot of reworking of narrative in the queer community. I don't know.
I agree. I agree 100% with you. Well, I mean, politically, some things are happening where the power is trying to be taken, but that also happened with like feminism movements as well, right? Like women wanting to be in their power. And so, yeah,
Mm.
I see that.
so to me, this is where the planet Uranus would come in.
Mm.
You know
Mhm.
that if people wrestling with questions of queer, right, sat with a good astrologer and who explained to them what Uranus was all about, right? To me, that conversation would be healing because it takes you out of the personal realm of how most people have a difficult relationship with things that are different, and it taps you into a universal principle of representing things that are different.
Yeah, I agree.
That's healing. That's healing to me because it's wholeness, right? You represent that your job. I tell people with strong Uranus, your job is to blow people's minds, right? And I say don't expect them to get you or understand you the first time, you know, because
Yeah.
you're so new and you're so different, right? They don't have the neural pathways for it to register. You got to give it time.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting too that you bring up Uranus because I kind of look at Uranus and I look at Saturn because with when I'm looking at Chiron, right? Because doesn't Chiron sit in between the two?
It dips in, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then there's a kind of like this like collaboration of possibly like structure and looking at it from that aspect with innovation to some degree.
Yeah. It just makes me think, Ricky, I know this is personal, but it's like your wounded narrative over like being forced into football versus being a professor. Like it's just interesting to watch. Like I feel like by having this outlet of we've made like 33 episodes by this time. And it's like you are living out your professorship. And I feel like the wounding over the football narrative is like gone. Like I haven't heard you bring up the football thing for like months.
Well, I just beat up all of our guests, so I don't, you know.
You're so nice to our guests. Are you kidding? You're the nicest.
Yes.
You've shown up and talked to them, which is not beating them up. Okay.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with my phone. Do you guys have any comments? We have 5 minutes on just culture and Chiron itself.
I think like when you're doing a chart with someone, I think looking at them obviously individual. I think a Chiron is personally when I'm reading as an astrologer, I think it is a important placement that I do look to, and I do look at yeah, I do like Chiron. But as far as culturally, you can ask the person, how that they, after describing what you're seeing in their chart, you can ask them how that has influenced them, or if it has at all, because it's going to show up different for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I kind of made a joke about it, but if I'm talking with someone, because I don't use Chiron, if I'm talking to someone and they bring up Chiron, then I know we have to talk about Pluto. I know they're avoiding something.
Starting the episode.
Yes, he's like taking it to another level. You're gonna have to rename the episode, Andy.
It's going to be called Chiron Pluto for white people. Okay. No,
No,
but
but I want to. But to me, this is like real. This is because when most white and black people are together, there's this thing where we can't really express how we actually feel, right? And I think both people miss out on that.
Interesting.
That's interesting. Like, how does that show up in an intimate relationship or interracial relationships and all of that kind of stuff? Does it create some source of tension? And maybe if you understand each other's charts a little bit better, you could understand each other.
Exactly.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
I will tell you that one of the last things on this list is fostering hope and optimism is a big thing of healing cultural wounds. And so I think, how can we are definitely doing that in this show because we are not perseverating on the wounds. We are definitely looking into the optimism of sharing race and astrology. So how can we continue to foster optimism? And I mean, Ricky's example of like, look at your chart and love everything is a great one, but how can we keep working the astrology community to foster hope and optimism about any wounds that have existed in astrology per se?
Yeah, for me, it comes back to what I've been saying over and over again. To have true hope and optimism, you have to have a vision of where you're headed. Otherwise, you just hope that you don't that it's not all pointless. That's not really hope. And so I think again, astrology allows us to embrace this idea of a whole system. And so I think we have to challenge ourselves and say, what do we really believe? What is our hope for the future? If it could be anywhere we wanted it to be, how would we have it? And are we aligning our actions and our behaviors and our thoughts in that direction? And I think if you align that way and you can view race, gender, culture as it's part of a larger whole, then I think optimism it's built in. But it comes back to this idea of wholeness. And we have to have some image of wholeness in order to have any true, real optimism.
That's so cool. In my image of the future of astrology, this cultural layer is woven into the cake and baked all in, like we've been basically doing. And it's like that astrologers are going to be versed in talking about the layers of astrology and culture, just like it's nobody's business. Like that's the vision I see. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on. Okay, do you have any last thoughts? We have 1 minute left.
I don't. This has been a great conversation. I love being on your show, and this has been really fun. I love it.
Well,
thank you. Yeah,
Ricky seemed to enjoy this episode, so
I did.
I don't know if I'll be getting any email follow-ups. All right, thank you both. I really enjoyed this. I have no wounds left. I am healed.
Good.
We are whole. We are whole.
We are whole.
We are holing. Okay, guys? Holing.
I mean, that sounds kind of dirty, but okay. All right, you guys. I'll see you later.
All right.
Bye.